Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and tonight we're going to continue the discussion we've had a while back about the Constitution of the United States and a couple of the issues that have come up lately. And to help us understand it, Margo Jones is welcoming back. Welcome.
Thank you, George. I appreciate coming back. There have been a lot of things that have been going on in this world since I talked to you last. And I hope that we hit a few of the pertinent things that people might be interested in learning.
Well, where we left off talking about whether Trump should be on the ballot or not in Colorado, and the decision from the Supreme Court that essentially said that Colorado could not ban him from the ballot because that's not a prerogative of the states. So that's all tied into the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, particularly paragraph 3. And you wanted to emphasize something about that.
The wording of the Constitution has, and I've underlined the words, it does not say president or vice president. We talked about electors last time.
Yeah.
But it says office of military. And another place that it is interesting is he takes an oath of office. And we know that that is a prerogative for taking presidencies and things like that. And the word office of the United States does refer to anybody in Washington, congressman.
It's any federal government.
The whole federal government.
Yeah.
So they have, he passes all the requirements in here without the word president or vice president being spoken. The commander-in-chief of the forces makes him military under this.
Well, he takes an oath of office if he's elected.
That's right.
And so therefore, this 14.3 applies to the president and the vice president, even though they aren't specifically enumerated.
Right. And
we
have spoken about the judgment could be overturned if he is elected because the Congress of both, which means both houses, Senate and Representatives, pass with a 2/3 vote of approval. So that is the state of affairs in the voting of that's coming up. The fact that in discussing the Constitution and having this decision made by the court, it became an issue of what is the court responsible for. And they are responsible from the first word of the Constitution to the last word of the Constitution. And anything that is not in there or could be interpreted for being in there belongs to the state. And we're now thinking, well, if it was to the state, why didn't Colorado get to do what they did? So there are so many interpretations going on in the judgments that it is really kind of putting it in terms of a decision or a judgment. A decision, I do believe, puts it on the books. And the judgment is how they approve or disapprove of what is the case brought before them.
One other curious thing about this decision, Justice Elaine Kagan, who was probably one of the most liberal on the court, sort of agreed with the decision on banning or prohibiting Colorado from banning Trump from the ballot, because that gets to be a slippery slope. Because all of a sudden, if Colorado can do it, why can't Florida? Why can't New York? Why can't and why can't Texas ban Biden? And next thing you know, we've got a bunch of elections where only one person is on the ballot in one state and a different person is another state. That gets to be very messy very quickly. So I think there's also a practical matter to this decision that put everybody on the ballot, we'll sort it out later.
We'll see how it works out.
Yes.
Okay.
And the other issue that I guess you were concerned about too is, again, it's a constitutional decision or a decision about the Constitution by the Supreme Court, and that's the case of Dobbs in Mississippi, which ended up overturning Roe v. Wade. And some interesting comments. One from Samuel Alito, who wrote the opinion for the majority, came down to say Roe v. Wade and repeated subsequent high court decisions reaffirming Roe v. Wade must be overturned because they are egregiously wrong and the arguments exceptionally weak and so damaging they amount to an abuse of judicial authority. So at least from the conservative part of the Supreme Court, that's their thinking, that the previous court just overstepped their bounds, and they get to this magic word of, oh, they're legislating from the bench again.
But the Constitution does have in it life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
And life is that most important moment in a person's life when it takes its first breath. Then it is a person that the Supreme Court, the Constitution, can work with this person that has just been born so that we have a Constitution for the people. Yeah. All right? And then we have somebody in Alabama who says, oh, that's not when people come into the world. They come into the world way back when. But because the Constitution does not have anything in it, they keep interpreting the word liberty. I should, quote unquote, take the liberty to say they take the liberty with liberty. Yeah. And it is a question that becomes handled in the hands of the states. And in the states, they have decisions to make on transportation, they have it on science, they have it on medical procedures, they have it on all kinds of things. And women have tried to get into the Constitution that liberty refers to them as much as to men.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the people making the judgment and decisions about putting women's rights back into the Constitution so that it could be controlled in the Constitution, the votes are made by men.
Well, women have the vote.
Oh, I know, but the decision has to be.
There's more women than there are men.
That may be true, but it is our Congress that makes the decision of putting something in there with a 2/3 vote.
Well, actually, the states that have to approve.
They have to approve it first, but if in order to get it into the Constitution.
Well, the usual path to making an amendment to the Constitution is somebody in Congress inaugurates a set of words that they approve. And after both houses of Congress approve it, they send it around to the states to have them approve it.
Right.
And that's when you get to this two-thirds rule kind of thing. But,
So
but as you notice, there are a number of women of extreme importance and power, both in the Congress, House of Representatives, and in the Senate. So
they might be arguing for, but the final decision has to be 2/3. And and as you pointed out, as much as there are very capable women to support a decision that might get put in to the Constitution, it's in the role of the states. So the question is there any way of convincing people in the states that there should be something on their agenda that puts the women's rights in terms where a woman has control of her body, her mind, and her soul? And it is not in any way described in that way.
no,
And it should be that a woman has as many rights as a man would have. The men, and there are states that are pro-life that have designated the term of giving birth can be divided into 3 or 4 sections, and each one has a way of being controlled, unless, of course, it has no right whatsoever, and they just say, our state will have no abortions, period. They will follow that up with a statement of not even in incest, rape, or other disabilities. Some of them don't even put the right of the woman who is in poor health, maybe losing her life if she conceives to birth. And this is the problem of many of the states and many of the women. So if the word is that, can the states put in rulings that protect women rather than dictates to women?
well, there is right now a wave of activity going through the country, state by state, to do something about what the Supreme Court said they ought to do, is make a decision about abortions. And there are, I think, 6 states that already have made a decision on defining when an abortion can be performed and under what conditions they are. And in many of these states, they include the words you're suggesting about rape and incest, and also the health of the mother kind of issues. So that is happening piece by piece. What is going to end up being very confusing is every state will have a different date.
Right, but they should have a acceptance to a woman having the right of decision. And that is something that I find, to cut it down piecemeal. My concern about this, and I know you are not necessarily in agreement with me on this, but there are 2 very serious problems of the world right now. And one of them is finite and the other one is infinite. And it falls into our discussion if we know what the answer is. If something is finite about the world, not just our state or country, what would you make as the biggest concern we should have about something that's finite?
Well, the Earth itself is finite. There's only so much of it.
There's only so much of it, okay? Is there anything about what's on the Earth or in the Earth or about the Earth that is of concern to every part of the Earth?
Well, a lot of things are.
Well, there's one in particular.
You got one. Okay, spit it out. Tell me what.
Water.
Water. Okay, have a drink.
Very good. But water is what sustains people, plants, fish, animals. There are a few exceptions that survive on other chemicals, but once things have gone, global warming and all the other things, we should be concerned about it.
Yeah.
But there's something that's infinite that we should also have concern about, and that happens to be people.
Mm-hmm.
There were controls way back when people were in the thousands of years ago that actually controlled their population. And we are now, in modern day age, increasing the number of people that the world is out of balance. In the 70s, there was a decision that the production and the population were at a balance, that going with more people after that, we were putting things in a bad control. That you brought up the particular name, and I thought it was really kind of amusing, that Paul Ehrlich was doing research on diseases,
Yeah.
and concluded, as he was doing his work, that we will eat ourselves to death.
Yeah.
That this gets to be a point where the number of people will outnumber the sources to keep them fed. And I have to admit that coming here this morning, the conversation was a country that has now faced starvation due to lack of water in some places and overpopulation with no resources for the people.
Yeah.
It is a very, very dominating problem. And as you pointed out, there are some countries that have, and what countries were these that have sustainable people to?
Well, most of Europe, China, and Japan are in a situation where they are not reproducing fast enough to sustain their population. The magic number is 2.1 births per woman, and that will get you a population that is self-sustaining. Italy is down to 1.2. The United States is well below 2. China has got a problem that they had this one-child rule for years, and the net result is their population is not what. So what has been happening is the old pyramid that we used to have of distribution by age has turned into a diamond. There is a bulge that is moving up, and there's nothing to replace it. So, yeah, there are countries, Africa in particular, India is another one, that have populations that are growing very quickly, and they have a food shortage problem. But it's not everybody.
I will put in an opinion of one person at the beginning of the Hamas invasion of Israel, and it came about in describing what was the reason, and that is that Palestine happens to be one of the most populated per area countries in the world.
Yeah. Good.
And by making an affront against a neighboring country, the instigators have put the people at the front so that they can, in my estimation, reduce the population of the country.
Yeah, going to war is a heck of a nasty way to have population
have to control things. But if you think about it, there are all kinds of things that people do, but that happens to be one of the oddest of insurrections, to put the country at risk when it is an idea of a very small number of people.
Oh, yeah.
And this is not the way to control.
No.
War does not answer any problem, except for maybe eliminating people.
Yeah.
That, I don't believe, is the way to do it.
Oh.
I would like to see our states put in controls for our population. One of the things that we have is pharmaceutical companies, which have pills so that women can not give birth. We have men that have contraceptives and whatever they...
Surgical procedures.
Well, they could have surgical procedures,
Yeah.
but condoms work just as well for reducing
Yeah,
the
they're
number
working
of...
out a birth control pill for men, too.
Oh, then they... But, so there are things that... And now they're even considering banning all of some of the things that people are doing to prevent this overpopulation of the cities. Because I am a person who watches television shows about the world, I am astonished at the population cities that I see before my eyes, and I wonder, how does anybody function in these tremendously populated areas? Another problem about overpopulation is the closer we come to the natural world, viruses are becoming very much something we should be concerned with.
Well, that gets us into another whole issue of...
So we need to control the rights of women to have the choice of whether they have a birth or not. You brought to me this particular situation that I asked the question, how many single parentage families are there in the United States?
Yeah.
And the answer was that there are 10.2 million single parent households,
Yep.
of which 80% are women,
Yep.
and 20% or 1/5 of them are in poverty.
I think it's more than that, but yeah, it's a serious
But that
problem.
was the number that came up. But that number, when I found, was 10 million. These people may not have wanted a child. If I don't want a child, a woman has 18 years of responsibility for this newborn.
Yeah.
As it pointed out, we have 10 million of these households. Some have men at the realm,
Yeah.
but the right to have a child should be the decision of the woman.
Okay.
That's what I'm here to
Okay. Well,
encourage the states to take a hold of this, petition women. if you were out there. Don't have them just want your money. Get your name over there on a petition, if that's what it's called in the States,
Yeah.
to give you the right. I even have a proposal that I wrote out.
Well, I think that the point you're making is that people have to get involved and
It's not up to
make their voices heard, which means you got to talk to your representatives and the Congress and the Senate and tell them where you're coming from and tell them which way you want them to react accordingly.
We have been talking about state rights, and thanks to George's research, I would like to voice my support for women's rights by reading the Florida Amendment number 4 to be on this year's ballot. No law should prohibit, penalize, or delay or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health and determined by the patient's health care provider. There was a voice of support in the article that George provided me with that said by Ann Pierce, "It's a democratic country and everybody has the right. No one has the right to make a decision for a woman to know when they should carry a baby or not. At the end of the day, they will be the ones taking care of it." Women's rights need to be supported. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And as you can tell, this is going to be an ongoing discussion, and it's going to be a very testy couple of years because there's a lot of different opinions out there, and they're very solidly held by different people. And again, as I mentioned, if you have a comment, my email address is at the end of the credits, and if you want to express your opinion, we can make room for you here at the table. And thanks for joining us.